Hello, this is Business Africa, and I am Ignatius Ano. Our top stories. E-commerce in sub-Saharan Africa grows exponentially thanks to the pandemic, but with limited ICT infrastructure still a significant barrier in the region, how can this growth be sustained? South African Airways enters final stage of negotiations for a purchase and sales agreement with a potential investor, but nowhere yet on when the airline will resume flights. And a little later, we're in Morocco, where essential oil producers hope to register an organic label for local roses to boost value on the world market. Details right now. The African digital economy is expected to continue its exponential growth trend. Now, that's according to the Oxford Business Group. The pandemic led to widespread growth in e-commerce in sub-Saharan Africa. This growth offering has changed consumer habits. But can the industry bank on sustainability post-pandemic? We'll hear from an e-commerce expert momentarily. But first, here's a report on the digital transition birthed by the coronavirus.
The coronavirus pandemic triggered an e-commerce boom in sub-Saharan Africa alongside the rest of the world. With the global recovery underway, questions have been raised on how this growth can be sustained. E-commerce companies and platforms enjoyed a rise in activity and profits, while retailers that had not previously developed their online presence found themselves obliged to do so in order to survive. However, growth in e-commerce has been unevenly spread in global terms, being concentrated in wealthier countries and regions. Survey results published in the UN Capital Development Fund report in March found that more than 40% of customers in 4 large African countries were planning to reduce their supermarket shopping in the future by purchasing food, clothing, and electronic online. Sub-Saharan Africa is particularly prone to the effects of limited ICT infrastructure. The International Telecommunication Union estimates that the proportion of individuals in the region who use the internet at least occasionally is 28.2%, considerably below the average of developing and developed countries.
Paul Osino is the Executive Director of E-Commerce Association of Ghana. He joins us from Accra. Thank you for your time, Paul. So first, there's still a large part of Africans without internet access and the infrastructure needed to drive e-commerce, according to a recent report by the UN Conference on Trade and Development. Now, cost of data is still a luxury for many on the continent. So what's working for industry players?
The cost of data issue is not across board. It varies. For instance, in Sao Tome, 1 gigabyte costs around $28 US. At the same time, in Somalia, 1 gigabyte costs 50 cents. If I'm an investor from outside the continent and I want to make some money in the space, if I look at the sheer numbers in terms of population, it's good for me to put some dollars on the continent, and then I may even have the luxury of reducing certain prices a bit because the numbers across board will make my profits. The inconvenience of traffic has been removed. So I think that with the expanded infrastructure and then the growing numbers is doing a good job in terms of e-commerce in Africa.
And now there are development to boost e-commerce, including the third phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area negotiations set to take place this year. What are your expectations for when this begins?
So far, so good. But I would suggest that a lot more engagement is done with e-commerce associations and players. Our members are the ones who are really going to benefit from the after. So it's easier for us to reach our members and then advise them, bring them onto the table for this after agreements to be properly achieved. Because it looks a lot from our side that there's a lot of things going on, positive things, but a lot also doesn't get to many players who are ready to take advantage of it. Also, I would like to state that governments within the after. They shouldn't be the front runners of the agreement as much as possible. They should just create the conducive environment for after, and the people who are the companies and the stakeholders, key players in it to grow.
And finally, as economies open up post the pandemic, how can growth in the industry be sustained?
To a very large extent, depends on us, the e-commerce people ourselves. I'm looking at enhanced consumer satisfaction, for instance. Here, I'm talking about, boosting seamless transactions so that if someone goes to my website, for instance, and picks what he wants, and it comes to payment, it shouldn't be a hassle for the person. And that is not the fault of the buyer. It's the seller who has to ensure that all these things are done well. E-commerce shops should also improve, for instance, their packaging. The question of offering rewards and incentives for especially regular online buyers is also a way of helping keeping or retaining customers online. I also call on e-commerce shops to invest a bit more when it comes to logistics. They should have good return policies so that trust is maintained or even enhanced in the industry.
We appreciate your time on the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Nations.
And Paul Asino is the Executive Director of E-Commerce Association of Ghana. Now, South Africa's national airline is officially out of bankruptcy protection. After over 17 months, the airline cannot look forward to a new buyer. The SAA is in final phase of negotiations with a potential investor. South Africa's Department of Public Enterprises has said this fresh deal will bring capital and much needed technical and commercial expertise to the company. But what remains uncertain is exactly when the airline will take to flight.
There may be a light at the end of the tunnel for South African Airways. The airline, which has been on the verge of bankruptcy, announced it had left a form of bankruptcy protection called a business rescue and was handed back to its executives. It comes as the airline received $537 million from the government. It has been reported negotiations with a new shareholder are in the final stages. Heavily in debt, the airline has not made a profit since 2011 and has survived for years on public money. Since September 2019, its planes have been grounded due to the coronavirus pandemic. To pay off its debts, the business rescue practitioners cut almost 80% of the airline's workforce. The company is expected to restart with fewer staff of around 1,000 employees against nearly 5,000 previously.
Rose flour is a prized commodity for essential oil producers in Morocco. A small distillery in central Morocco produces rose water and essential oils for onward sales to retailers. Stakeholders in the essential oil business in this North African nation are hoping to register an organic label to boost the value for local roses on the global market.
To earn a living, Ami Mou, a rose picker in Morocco's Atlas Mountains, wakes up at dawn to collect 3 kilos of flowers before the sunshine damages the pink petals. The work allows her to feed her family.
I feed a family of 5 people. My children are young. They go to school.
It takes about 6 hours to fill the big bags that the women carry on their heads to the weighing station. That for Mu gives just under $7 a day. But when eventually distilled into precious oil, this could cost $18,000 after processing.
The oil of the rose is the most essential because it is very expensive in the international market. It is sold for between 16,000 and 17,000 euros per litre, and we need 5 tons of roses to produce a litre of rose oil. So the rose here is known by its oil and rose water, and of course by its perfume.
Moroccan rose exports are currently restricted mostly to rose water and dried flowers. Essential oils account for only about 50 kilos of annual exports and concrete for 500 kilos.
Kelatumguna is known for its roses and their byproducts. The origin of its roses comes from Damascus, Syria. Here it is called the Rose of Damascus or Damascena. The roses have found a good climate in Kelatumguna, which helps the people here to distill roses in May.
With the pandemic, the price of fresh flowers has sunk by about 30% in the past 2 years.
And that's it for Business Africa. You can be a part of the program via our various social media handles. Follow me on Twitter @IgnatiusAno. Also, head over to Africanews.com for the entire program and more. I thank you for watching and goodbye.